This is KTN Sunday edition, where you get the best analysis on the politics of the country from throughout the week. We are almost at the tail end of the show. Our final topic this afternoon actually, is the Kenyatta National Hospital saga, a tale of a head surgery gone wrong or given to a patient who didn't need it, and the patient who needed that head surgery very badly to remove a blood clot has died. The results, the Kenyatta National Hospital CEO and her deputy being sent on compulsory leave. This was announced earlier this week by the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Cecily Kariuki. Let's take a look at what she said. Then we'll get back to the conversation on the Kenyatta National Hospital and the politics surrounding it.
The CEO of this organization, with the colleague responsible for clinical matters of this hospital, are sent on compulsory leave forthwith, and in their place, 2 experts will be taking over to run this institution for the period the investigations will be done, and a decision will be reached following the investigations. I therefore wish to pronounce myself on this matter by appointing in acting capacity Dr. Mutie and Dr. Ongech, both competent professionals who understand the systems in this hospital, to take over and support the board to complete the investigations which I have directed be conducted immediately.
Cabinet Secretary for Health, Cecily Kariuki, there pronouncing herself on the Kenyatta National Hospital saga, and of course consequently sending the CEO on compulsory leave together with her deputy. Let's now throw it back to our panelists. I will start with Mark Bichachi. Mark, from the latest developments with regard to this story, some members of parliament led by Senator Kericho County, Aaron Cheruiyot, have come out to say that this is witch hunt against the CEO, but looking very intricately at some of the issues that have dogged KNH and what some members of parliament are saying. I mean, where are we drawing the line on this? Okay.
For me, this issue is quite personal to me, for the simple reason that I've followed this case from the beginning, simply because I was very curious to know what was really going on, and having consulted for various hospitals before, I'm quite familiar with the landscape of PR around hospitals. And therefore, let's start with the term issues that have dogged KNH. We start with the first issue early this year, where we talked about women who have been supposedly raped in this hospital. And everyone was against Lily Koros for the very simple reason that she did not admit that there was someone who was raped there. Now, time has passed. There is not a victim who's come out. 2, the witnesses who have been there have had contradictory stories. And that, to me, tells me at least I have to ignore that it exists, or I have to admit to the fact that it was a fake. My considered opinion is that that was a fake. Secondly comes a story of a husband with his wife and the sister with newborn twins, who allowed these newborn twins to be held by strangers. You do not know which diseases have brought them to hospital. You do not know where they come from, and your children are new. A father who can do that is spectacular. But anyway, we sided with the father and decided it's the hospital's fault. Now, CCTV from the hospital is used to find this child. No comment on the fact that the hospital has provided the infrastructure necessary to keep this child safe, because without CCTV, that child would not have been found. Then we say dogging. These are 2 unrelated issues. The third issue, a member of staff refuses to follow protocol, messes up a surgery. The CEO takes the steps as laid down by the laws and the bylaws, the authorities governing that hospital, and does the right thing. At the same time, we have a hand that was fixed, conjoined twins that was fixed. We have statistics of over 29,000 surgeries that happen in this hospital, which this one is less than 1% of 29,000. And yet, we want to blame this hospital, yet it has the highest patient numbers, highest number of cases that are referred to it, which means the referrals that come there are the hardest to deal with.
Yes.
So we are in a situation where, let me finish here, where we are looking at Lily Koros unfairly and blaming her for issues that, if we are genuine, happen in every other hospital.
So we are being dishonest about the KNH
Absolutely.
conversation. This must.
Now, Akesa Wandera, sorry. When you're giving statistics around human beings, that becomes dangerous. If you're doing a general survey, then statistics are statistics. But there's a family somewhere that has lost a beloved one. So if you're doing 29,000 surgeries in a year, success rate must be 100%. Because the fella who has lost a father or a mother or a breadwinner does not care about the other successful statistics. For this fella, if it's a breadwinner, tomorrow they're not going to school, they're not going to have a meal. That's what you're supposed to look at. Now let's go to the role of a CEO. A CEO must create systems which work. So it's the responsibility of the CEO to create systems which work. If they do not work, you take liability. Now for the case of KNH, Koros fired the registrar, the nurses, and everybody else. And then the boss checks in and also says, even you need to go to a compulsory leave so that we do these investigations. So it's something about karma coming back. You've suspended these guys before doing investigations. Your boss comes and says, you also need to go home. But let's look at a scenario. I see Mark is flabbergasted, but let's look at the scenario. When you go to any hospital, and I took liberty because I've got many friends who are medical doctors, you go to the general ward, there's a medical doctor who looks at you, who makes the recommendation that you probably need to go for surgery. Now, before the surgery takes place, you move from the general ward, you go to a preparation room while you are prepared for the surgery. And because majority of us are Christians, that's why you see people gathered to say a prayer, hoping that the surgery is going very well. That's when people, the next of kin, that's when they sign the consent forms. And then, of course, you go to the theater. Now, there are about 11 people who are supposed to ensure that the person who is going to undergo a certain surgery is the person who is intended to go for that surgery. So there was a lapse in judgment. There was a failure in so many places, which brings to forth the question, are there standard operating procedures at KNH? Is there quality assurance at KNH? Now, if you don't have standard operating procedures at KNH, if there's no quality assurance at KNH, then who takes responsibility? Let's use examples that we are very familiar with. If you go and stay in a 5-star hotel, when you're checking out after a week, you are given a piece of paper to say you've actually paid your bills, now you can go, unless you want to jump through the fence. Now at KNH, when you are discharging a patient, how is it that a fella, okay, maybe the parent was reckless, but how is it possible that a fella can walk into KNH, pick a kid, and go through the security gates without anybody bothering to ask, wait a minute, are you the father, are you the mother, what is your relationship? So there are so many questions which remain unanswered. And you would understand why Mark is defending this position. And you would understand why Senator Aaron Cheriot is defending Koros, because you know that's what he's paid to do. Maybe Koros comes from Kericho. That's what he's supposed to be doing. If he doesn't do that, he's going to be sacrificed. But at the end of the day, Akisa, what we must say as a nation, people must start taking liability. And if people are using KNH, maybe they're cartels, or it's a political play. Because right now, people in Jubilee are saying, do you also want us, the Kikuyus, to bring our MPs to defend Cicely Kariuki? If those are the things, then we need to do investigations. Now, going to the matter of investigations that Cicely Kariuki says is being done, who is doing these investigations? Is it the same medical doctors? Because medical doctors are known to defend themselves. They're unlikely to find anybody guilty. And it's important people take liability for this. There was a case in the UK which was very interesting. There was a couple that had issues with fertility. They went to the clinic, and because they're whites. And when the wife delivered, it was a black kid. These are kind of things that you cannot allow. And please, let's run away from saying we've done 29,000 successful surgeries, so if one is a failure, it's
so
okay.
you think there's systemic failure with the KNH, from what I get from what you're saying?
And learn to appreciate best practices.
If I could
quickly, Mark,
respond
I need to have...
in 30 seconds, it is such hubris to say there are no standard procedures. When you had 29,000 successful operations, under which procedures? Let's understand one thing. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. The reality of the matter is there are procedures. It is those procedures that led and called for the suspension of that staff. So just because it does not fit your frame, or you want to imagine that medical doctors don't make mistakes, they do. Check every other hospital.
All right.
Well, you know, it could be hubris to the general public, but if you've lost your wife, your husband, your
You're
father,
taking it down
your
to
mother.
the individuals.
That cannot be.
All right.
This is an individual thing.
All right.
I think this
Husband,
is a
is there
local
systemic
derby. They can
failure,
finish it
or
off
are we
air.
dishonest about this conversation?
Exactly.
Yes, I understand the two positions that they take because it's a very intricate situation to talk about because there's a family that has lost one of their own and there is a family that is probably having one of their own being vilified and we need to situate this broadly and find out to what extent are we going to blame the CEO. CEOs are paid, you know, some good amount of money to take such risk that their jobs can go anytime. And I think Koros should be alive to that. But I'm not saying that it is prudent to deal with this, you know, by looking at individuals, because it is not an individual thing. It can never be an individual thing. I agree with Mark that there is a lot that goes on at Kenyatta and an hospital is a crisis institution. From morning to evening, there is always a crisis. Doctors are involved in procedures that save life, and sometimes things can go bad. So we need to be very clear on to what extent are we going to blame an individual.
Right.
So when Koros was sent on compulsory leave, was it because there was an establishment that she had put in place as a CEO, systems that were not working?
Okay.
And when Koros was sending these medical doctors, you know, away, was it because these medical doctors did not adhere to the laid down procedures?
All
and
right.
I think if we know that, then we can make a very sober conversation out of this.
Kavemba, we don't have too much time. I'll let you have the last word on this.
It actually boils down on those two issues. Whether, first, it would be very wrong for a blanket condemnation of the institution of the KNH, because as a person who works with the common mwananchi, I know the important role it plays in our health sector.
Yes.
It has saved people who would have no other option if it were not KNH. So blanket condemnation of the institution should not be the way to go. The second thing is whether it is systemic failure, and that would call for an audit of the same, and that probably you can tell by the number of incidences that we are getting from, because when it is just a one-off, you can probably find out whether it is systemic failure or it is a human error or human negligence, because those ones are also there. So the two things that need to be done first is to establish what the problem is, which is leading to all these incidences being reported and on a very regular basis, so that we do a system audit should be done, including even procedures from the point of admission to the point of leaving the hospital, verification processes, because if you followed this, the two patients who were involved were actually in a coma. That simply means that they would not have spoken for themselves. But the other thing that needs to be commended is that there needs to be action when such things happen. When there's something wrong, when something wrong happens, there should be consequences for it, because it is the only way to fight impunity. It would not be right for people to start coming in defense of certain individuals because they represent them, because in any case, even the patient who died as a senator or MP who represents them, even the doctor who was interdicted, and if they all come up just in defense of the people, you know, blind to the facts of the matter, then we would have a problem. I believe what needs to be injected in the public sector is, you know, we need to do away with impunity, so that whenever you do something wrong, I want to give you an example.
Quickly.
There was a fire in Langata the other day, and the response was very poor. Actually, the fire engines got there, and they had no water. What happened? The governor of the city suspended the people who were on duty that day and the person who was in charge in fire. Less than 2 weeks after that, there was a fire in Dagoretti South. You would have noted the difference in the way the whole thing was handled. Actually, no one was suspended because they'd known that there are going to be consequences when we fail to do our job right. That is what needs to be implemented in the public sector.
Mark, we don't have much time. One sentence.
The doctors that operated on that particular patient do not even work for Kenyatta Hospital. They are seconded from the university. So when we want to blame the CEO, we need to understand that there's a difference between personal responsibility and institutional responsibility, and we're mixing those two
This
issues.
is a conversation that needs another sitting. It needs more time. Gentlemen, I want us to wrap it up on that note. Mutinda Kavemba is a political strategist. Hezbon Owila is a political analyst and community communication expert. Mark Bichachi is a political and communication strategist. And finally, Dismas Mukua is a political risk strategist. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in here and having those very interesting views about an array of issues that have made it to the headlines this week. That's how we wrap it up here on KTN Sunday edition. I will be leaving you with a Siasa file or a clip of Jomo Kenyatta speaking in Parliament a few years, very many years actually ago.